I think I think Pete and I were backstage that entire time. So we were talking, we revealed like the secret of life. Pete told us the lottery numbers for the day, but we don't have any time for that stuff. I'm sorry. So hopefully you guys are seeing and hearing us now. Um, Honestly, you guys didn't miss much. We talked about uh, our holiday plans, and then I asked Pete, Pete, why are you here? Why should we trust you? Pete, I'm sorry. Would you mind repeating that, please? We need these people to know who you are, man.
So thanks. And it was a good dress rehearsal in
It
the
was.
backstage, so
It
in the
was.
green room.
Yeah.
So
I'm just here to help.
so so I'm Pete Busam. I'm the owner of Equilibrium Consulting, commonly also known as the Marketects, Marketecture, Marketects, for marketing. We are a MSP marketing firm. We started out from a MSP and grown into a MSP marketing. So we were built with purpose from purpose. But we are a little different, a little bit more boutique, that we are not trying to scale to be the largest MSP marketing firm out there. We want the companies that have some maturity, or they want to be process driven and do things methodically to build brand, move to demand, and be able to look at analytics behind it. Thus, our conversation today on HubSpot will help us. Uh, but again, 18 years old, and from a what makes us different? Our average tenure with clients is 5.27 years full time.
Wow.
In the MSP marketing world, it's usually every 8 to 10 months firms transfer to. So we have very long tenure with our clients, and we've become very good and you know in their ecosystem of who they are, what they're about, so we can really look to drive their brand and then switch once their brand is recognized into that demand generation capability.
All right.
So now you
Well,
know. Now
now
you know.
now
If
you
you know, you
know.
know.
And what do they say? The more you know, with the little star and the rainbow.
There you go.
Yeah. So,
It's a lot of you knows going on.
yeah, I know what you mean, you know? So, uh, well, hey guys, today we're going to talk about HubSpot. If I sound like Eeyore, I will repeat this part. I apologize. My voice is just exhausted from yesterday. I was in a choir. So, yeah, I will do my best to not sound mopey, but I'm in a great mood. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to Pete. And I think he and I are going to have a great conversation that you guys are going to really enjoy. So with that, um, let's just dive right in, Pete. So I think there are some like setup mistakes that people could be making with HubSpot. Um,
No,
well,
never
look,
happened.
Look, all right. I'm not saying I'm not going to come out and just say like you're doing it wrong and point at any of the people watching this, okay? But there are some signs that an MSP is using HubSpot incorrectly. Like, I don't know. I remember phew, dating myself 15-ish years ago using like ConnectWise and Autotask and playing with them to figure out like, all right, if this thing's supposed to run my whole business, how do I do marketing from it?
You
And
don't.
yeah.
So that's a big it's I don't want to say it's a mistake, but it's a thing where people get tangled up and they it slows them down. And the quicker that you realize that the PSA is really not a good place to park your marketing data. The quicker you come to that realization, the better off you are. And there's other tools, and HubSpot may not be the end all be all for everybody. It's what we're talking about today, but it's almost like there's a separation. Free client and client, right? PSA is
Mhm.
great for your clients and managing your clients and taking orders and holding them and changing them into agreements and things of that nature. payment processing and out to payment processors such as you guys. But driving into a prospect, people tend to take all that data and put it up into a PSA, and then they realize they really can't track anything. There's no data analytics. There's no way to score engagement and many other things. So the quicker you can separate that and say, I really don't want to put all of that stuff inside Autotask, ConnectWise, Halo, whatever it is.
Mhm.
I don't want to put it in there. The better off you are. The other thing is it's going to help you keep your data on your clients a little bit cleaner too, right? And that's, why junk up your PSA with stuff that's nothing. It's not going to do anything for you. It's just going to create confusion and garbage, so.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Um, what do we always say? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So
Mhm.
you want to keep your PSA clean, is what I'm hearing. And to keep your PSA clean, that doesn't mean every single lead or prospect needs to be in the PSA. Not yet. You can start them off in the marketing platform. You can run all of your drip campaigns and blast campaigns, whatever, your newsletters, all that stuff. You can run it out of your marketing platform.
Yeah.
Whether that marketing platform is HubSpot, MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, Go High Level, Blast Hive, whatever.
Pick
Right
it.
now, we're just talking theory. Okay.
Yeah. I always say the PSA is built for service
Hmm.
and the CRM is built for pipeline and growth, right? And when
Yes.
you get those roles mixed up, it becomes harder, but if you separate them, it'll make it easier. So that's my piece on a PSA. Next one, it also talks about um, ownership, like
Mm.
what's the authority on your data, right? And contacts, company, and deals. Where's the authority going to be? And that's something that a lot of companies, when they go to separating from a PSA and a CRM, they don't think about which one is going to be authoritative. And
Mm.
so that first step we talked about by separating clients and prospects, right? Um, it gives you a little bit to lean towards where the authority is going to be. Prospects, the authority is going to be in your CRM, i.e. HubSpot or whatever the tool is, or clients are going to be in the PSA, but they need to talk somehow, right? And we'll talk a
Yeah.
little bit about integrations a little bit more and integrating with purpose, but we really want to make sure that the ownership of where the prospects have ownership are versus where the contacts for clients are. And that's how you can help define also a little bit more as to, which one, where they belong. So, um, taking the responsibilities clearly, spelling out, looking at the system and ensuring that, you know, there's a consistency between the two, right? And that's another thing that we'll talk about a little bit more is mapping and all that. But the consistency will outperform some of the complexities that go between the systems. Um, Prospects have a different way of tracking than a client, right? Tickets and all that are not in a prospect database. We don't have tickets against a prospect like we do a client. So little help there. So okay.
So when you say, you want to talk about like record ownership. So who who typically owns the data when it's in HubSpot versus in PSA? Like, do you think of it as this is my marketing department's data versus this is my service team's data, or should all of the data be able to go back and forth between the two? Like, should you do some type of sync between your PSA and HubSpot for certain records?
So I'm going to take that in two pieces. Ownership of the data, sales and marketing owns the data that's in HubSpot, and operations then owns, and service owns the PSA data, right? Part two is yes, absolutely. The data should be able to go back and forth, and a proper sync should be set up. Marketing usually sits as that middle point to say, this data needs to move. Now, the reason that it needs to move back and forth is not because we just want data duplicated, because we don't. That's not the purpose. We need to be able to say, I've now taken this prospect over here and I've grown it and I've moved it, but now I need to get an evaluation done that requires something from the service team. I need to push that quote or that opportunity over to say I need to open up a risk assessment. Well, risk assessment comes out of the PSA and the ticket system. So now if you can move that data and flow it from one side to the other, you'll be able to get that data in, open up the ticket, accumulate time and costs or whatever it is that you do with your risk assessments or studies or any network analysis that you might do, and then you can push results back over so sales can do the next piece, get the results from the site visit or whatever it is that you gather, put them back into a proposal. But now what you're doing is there's a coordinated piece between the data that needs to flow between. So sales and marketing are discussing with, and the data is there, and there's not a duplication that needs to be retyped, re-entered, etc. You can move it, and you can still have lineage back to the contact in the CRM. So you have that general ledger of what's going on within that contact.
I like that. Before we go much farther, I know I ran a poll earlier about like getting to know you guys better, um, but only a couple of you said what you're using for marketing. Can you guys just like put in the chat what's everyone using for marketing? Whether it's HubSpot, Glasshive, Go High Level, your PSA, um, a different platform that you think people should check out. Maybe you're not using anything for marketing. You can put that in the chat too. But let us know what you're using to like manage your marketing. Oh, look at that. Miles says he uses Pete. Specifically Pete. Nobody else on the team.
Thank you, Miles.
Thank you, Miles. We appreciate. I always love to see partners of our guests coming to these. That's always fun for me. No one else will do, only Pete. That's what Miles says.
Love it,
Um,
love it.
so, well, I mean, everything's already set up perfectly for Miles, right? So he doesn't even need to be here.
Just starting out. He's just
Okay,
starting out.
I'm kidding, Miles. You should be here. You're gonna learn something, man. You're not gonna learn enough to be able to fire Pete, but you'll learn something.
Wow, Steve.
We can only do so much in an hour, man.
So
Okay,
good to be
look.
here. So good to be here. So we were talking about syncing of data. um, but basically, if we do go back to that, all kidding aside, when you control the data flow, your system really becomes lighter and things move faster. It also gives you a process which helps in your maturity of your operations from prospect to cash, right? It'll help you move your data all the way through all of your systems versus not. And I think that's important. You don't want to keep duplicating data and adding and manually traversing like a lot of people do with spreadsheets of here to there because they're disconnected systems. So
Hmm.
very,
So
very important.
So we are in the process of migrating a bunch of our systems into HubSpot. When I joined the company, I said, "Hey, we should get HubSpot." And they said, "That sounds like a good idea someday." And then we started ramping up the marketing department and we started like building some stuff internally first. Like we knew what we needed as far as like the different types of databases and just the data we wanted to collect. So we started out doing things inside of Airtable. And what I'm noticing with Airtable, and if you guys aren't familiar, Airtable is just like a cloud-based database tool. It's yeah, you should know what Airtable is. Um, if you're not familiar with it though, like once you start to get like tens of thousands of records or hundreds of thousands of records, Airtable starts to get really slow. Like you go to open up a record and it might be 8 to 12 seconds before it goes from just like a white empty screen to showing you the record.
8 to
So
12 seconds.
it gets not every time, but it gets pretty bad, man. Yeah.
Sounds
So
like an eternity.
it feels like an eternity, especially when it's like, all right, so I'll just use me as an example because I know what I do. So let's say in a week, I'm able to book 4 different webinars for the future. Four is a solid number. So what I need to do now is I need to create all of those webinars in Airtable, which we're using it as our marketing content system.
Hmm.
So it's got like our calendar and all the different assets and everything. So I'm making like 50 different records for each webinar just to like start building out the template. And to do all that, like I've been able to build out some automation to do it, but just sometimes like clicking on a button to be able to select a different record from a different table to link them together, it takes seconds to do. And then when you have to do that 50 times or 200 times, because now, okay, so it's 50 for one webinar. I have to do 4 webinars. So now it's 200 records. It
Hmm.
it really starts to suck up a lot of time. So all that to say, let's say you go data crazy and you're thinking to yourself, I want everything that's in my CRM to or in my PSA to also be in HubSpot. I might not want two-way sync, but I want every detail from all my current clients in my marketing platform so I can also send out like newsletters and stuff. Am I going to slow down HubSpot and make it a pain in the butt to navigate between screens, or is it just more likely that I'm putting garbage data in there that I'm not going to use?
I think that all depends on the integration. I mean, there's some integrations that sit inside of HubSpot more native than others, right?
Hmm.
And if you find an integration that's out there and you don't see it listed inside of HubSpot, it's probably not tested with HubSpot. So it's probably not fully tuned to the API and what could be going. So you may have anomalies that occur. Could be speed, could be data, could be, improperly linking or just errors. Mostly any of the integrations that are listed in the store have been tested by
Hmm.
HubSpot and are approved for use with HubSpot. But again, um, you never know what's on the back end of the service. You don't know what their infrastructure is. You don't know what is going. So I always tell you, open a sandbox. It's easy to take a sandbox before you implement and integrate.
Yeah.
Work with dummy data. Don't work with your live data. You work with your live data, you know what can happen, right? And then it's harder to fix that in somebody else's system where you
Hmm.
need to go to a backup because that backup may not be as current as you need it to be. So
That makes really good sense. So what would you say to the MSP who sets up HubSpot and they say, you know what, I'm gonna just kind of like build it all as I go. Now, to clarify, what I'm saying is like we understand we've got I don't know, let's call it 8 weeks of setting up HubSpot. And we've got one guy where that's just going to be his job for the next 2 months as he's setting up HubSpot. So that guy has never set up HubSpot before. He doesn't know what a HubSpot like onboarding project looks like, but he understands an idea, sort of what he wants everything to do. So, why should or shouldn't he be just like setting up pieces, filling in data, setting up integrations, figuring out workflows, and just kind of doing it all in this probably haphazard, probably not, probably not well thought out project
Yeah.
because he just doesn't know any better.
So here's what we always tell MSPs, right? And anybody we work with, because we've worked with a couple of others, right? Um, Before you get into integrations and implementation, you should really define. If you can't make it work on paper, what makes you think you're going to make it work in the system? Right?
Mhm.
So you should define your workflows, whiteboard them, whatever tool you're going to use, right? So define your life cycle stages, define your lead handoff, like where does it move from stage to stage? Is it aligned with your quote structure? Like, do you have several stages of a sale, from prospecting to qualification to, whatever the 5 to 7 standard pieces are, right? Um, do you have a definition of what your sales process is? Most companies don't, and they get into HubSpot and they just go in and dive in, like you're saying, and the workflow isn't. So if you can't define your workflow of what your sales process is, you're probably going to trip yourself up somewhere, and it's going to be a bigger problem. It's easier to fix up front than it is when you have to go back and deal with all the data and the conversion of the data into a workflow or a process. It's done, but it will cost you time and it will probably cost you money coming out to a consultant that if you defined it up front, you can do it. So one, define your life cycle stages, define your lead handoff, define the sales process and how you measure success, right?
Mhm.
How are you going to measure success? And after that, then you can start talking about integrations because you may select something to integrate with, and without the process, you have no way to define whether that product is going to fit or not for the integration. So whether it can move the right data, can it map to the right data, or does whatever it's designed to do, will it fit into your process? And of course, nothing is going to fit 100%, right? If you can get it to 85%, that's probably really good, right? If you get above 85%, even better. But you shouldn't be integrating until you define the process. And once you define that process, then you can start looking at the integrations because now you know what you're looking for in an integration, where before it was, okay, it does this part, fills my void right now, but will it in 6 months, 9 months, a year? Probably not. So
Mhm.
maybe. So,
And I just want to say, you earlier you mentioned that you might be wasting time or money by, maybe not necessarily working off of a proven plan for implementing HubSpot.
mhm.
I would argue that, that is one thing MSPs have unlimited resources of. It's time and money. So I don't think they should worry too much about that.
No, not at all. Not at all. Every day they just want to throw money at us.
Yeah. So
So,
and I'm sorry, did you talk about I know you said like you should do things in a certain way. Did you go over maybe like an order of operations, if you will, of planning integrations, automations, when to put live data in, when do I stop going from planning on paper or Excel or whatever to building it out in HubSpot, all that kind of stuff.
so I did not go over an order of operations, but once you get that whiteboard done, where you're at the point where you say, okay, we've got it, we've basically, hit the dead horse more times than we ought to. We've got the process down. Knowing that you built the process, you can always change the process, add into it, but getting those basic workflows down. Then once you get those basic workflows down, I tell you basically to go in and build a sandbox, right? Build that sandbox. Your PSA companies will give you a sandbox if you ask them. They'll set you up with one. They don't charge you for that. They just set up the sandbox. And HubSpot, you can set up a sandbox also. And then set up some dummy data, import some from of your existing data, and then set it up between both sandboxes and go back and forth and make sure the data is transferring properly. Make sure what your expectation of what your process is, build the workflow inside of it, test it, and if it's working, then go up into a live environment. You've also boilerplated what you need to do, and you've learned live of, I shouldn't have flipped that switch because when I did, I blew up this piece. And we all know how that happens, right? We've all been in technology long enough to say things will blow up. But if you do it in that test environment and it blows up, you don't interrupt anybody's workflow. You don't impact anybody's workflow, especially in the PSA side if you haven't converted over into the CRM yet. So
Okay.
keep that. Um, I
No,
think it
that's
also, that practice gives you a little bit of scalability for the future, right?
I was going to ask you about that. You know, there's scalability is something that should be at the top of every MSP's mind because I'd like to think that you're in growth mode or at least you're thinking about growth holistically to where you want to make sure your systems are able to grow with your company. So, what does a scalable HubSpot foundation look like for an MSP? Does it matter if they're growing fast or growing steady or whatever? And is there a way to future proof HubSpot so you don't need to rebuild it later?
So the one thing that I always tell everybody is get out of the mindset of we can fix it later. Yes, you know you can fix it later, but that's not how you should design it, right? If you're thinking of we're going to grow and we're going to grow by 10%. If you set up for 10%, that's it. You've got to look into the future and say, we're going to double and triple the size of our organization. And if we do that, what does that mean? How do we manage our data? How do we assign it?
Mm,
Where does it go from there? So going in that mindset of we can fix it later, that's just a hurry up and get it done. It's not a, I want to grow my company and I want to keep my data and I want to set the process. Again, the beauty is if you build the process, you can change the process. So, because you designed it. And as you learn and as you grow, you will change things, right? If you don't change, that's not it. So, is there such a thing as future proofing something? No way, right? You can't future proof because changes
agreed.
in technology, even within HubSpot, they've gone through some major changes this year, and there's some major
Mhm.
things in beta. Campaign management is about to change. They've changed the way they're doing list management. A lot of things with AI coming in to the product. There's a lot of things that we wouldn't have thought of go 12, 24 months ago to say we could future proof it. We've got better things and tools in there. But, things that you can skip and people skip over time are like life cycle stages. If you don't set them up properly, you can't track the real buyer journey, right? So,
Yeah.
so how are you tracking the buyer's journey for your salespeople to do a workflow or anything against them to help capture them and bring them in and heat them up into engagement to turn it into a true prospect? Lead scoring. You heard me say heat them up. Well, lead
Hmm.
scoring is all based on engagement, right? How are the people
Yeah.
engaging with mass emails or social media or visits to the website or responding to one-to-one emails, right? And those are all things that can be done inside of the CRM, inside of a HubSpot. When you heat them up and they hit a certain score, you go over. But a lot of people don't even do that, and they just put 2,000 contacts in, and then they chase 2,000 contacts. Well, you know, we always recommend go in, run a couple campaigns, heat them up, see where the engagement is, then start segmenting the list out and marketing different, personalization to the people that are engaging, assign them to a rep and all that. Again, sales process, we talked a little bit about that earlier. So when you rush the setup, you end up rebuilding your system too many times. And we just talked with a pretty good MSP in the Northeast, and although they didn't select us, they basically are rebuilding their system because somebody went in and overbuilt the system and built
Mhm.
like 70 somewhat workflows that could have been simplified down probably into about 15 or 20. So
So
th-
you're saying you can over engineer your system because,
absolutely.
and I bet I would probably be the guy to do that. And I say this with love while criticizing myself. I overthink everything. Like, I'll think to myself, all right, so if we're doing um, a webinar on HubSpot, like, should I open up my HubSpot? Should I follow along? Like, should I mean, I overthink everything, man. Like,
So I don't even think that's overthinking. I think that's because of where we come from. Most of us in industry are technical in nature. We're not as
mhm,
sales and marketing oriented. So we think the logic portion of it. So there's a step, and everything we do is step, 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 right?
yeah,
And there's some system level type things that you want to do, and then there's, deeper dive in. And so I always tell everybody, be careful of getting all of your technical experts involved in everything because you will over engineer it. Let marketing sit in the middle. Marketing usually should control the CRM side. It should be an
mhm,
ownership on them. There's usually in the large installation somebody that's responsible for data and data management, right? Database administrators, what they used to call them, but now they call them data analysts in the CRM world. But you'll want to get people that are, um, in tune with process and building those processes. And then from there, you can say, okay, that's just a little bit too much because it removes flexibility. Anything that removes flexibility, sales will love because that allows some slipperiness. But owners don't like that they can lose any of that transparency. So it's a balance. You got to find it. But there is a way to over engineer it, and you do need to be careful and you need to do it right. Be careful of that.
good,
So, but
very good.
don't rush the setup. Take the time because if you set the core foundation, the foundation sets the future. So,
I agree with that. So we've just talked about some of the common setup mistakes that some, not all, people may make. In just a few minutes, we're going to start talking about some core principles of doing it right, of setting up HubSpot and utilizing it correctly for your MSP. But first, we're going to take what I like to call a little commercial break. Um, Pete, if you could please do us the honor, could you let everybody know what your company does and how you help MSPs for just a couple minutes?
yes. So, um, like I said earlier, we're going on 18 years old. We basically do a full stack of marketing, uh, done with you and done for you. So what is done with you? It means that you're involved. You're the subject matter expertise in your geography, your culture, right? And let's face it, everybody uses the same stack. So we see every day, everybody wants to say, well, we use this. It's irrelevant the products that you're using. It really boils down to your relationship and your brand and your reputation. So what we do is if it touches your brand, we do it, right? We help you with it. We have the graphic artists, we have the content writers, we have the web designers, we have the SEO experts, we have the MarTech stack from a PSA to a CRM team, and it's all in-house within our company. And our goal is to basically come alongside you and help you with the entire stack. And we bundle it for a monthly price, just like you sell an MSP service, we sell it right in the same way. So um, that's basically how it's done and how we do it.
It's awesome. Well, thank you for that. I just launched a poll. If if you guys think, hey, you know what Pete does is pretty awesome, and I'd love to have a conversation with him to see how he or his company can help my MSP, you can do that right on the poll. So I'll give you guys a moment to do that. Meanwhile, I would love to tell you guys more about alternative payments. And I gotta say, like I said earlier, we're about to dive into some cool stuff about HubSpot. But first, I want to show you something that can save you a ton of time and headache in your own business. Um, So, since today's all about cleaning up systems and removing busy work, let's talk about the one system every MSP hates dealing with: getting paid. Alternative Payments works with over 700 MSPs, and the reason is simple. We help you get paid faster without chasing anyone. These are just a few of the MSPs using us in the bottom left corner: Sage IT, Team Logic, 5K, Hayden, Valiant, Granite. All of these companies are getting smoother, faster cash flow because they're working with alternative payments. Um, on the client side, turning on auto pay is as easy as clicking a button. That's what the client sees on the right side of your screen there. They choose the method, they choose the amount rules, and it just kind of runs. Your clients will get a clean branded portal where paying you is simple. No emails, no phone calls, no missed invoices. They can view everything in one dashboard, manage their payment methods, and turn on autopay themselves. The less friction your clients have, the faster you get paid. And because today's webinar is all about integrations, that matters. We know MSPs love integrations. That's why we plug directly into your PSA and your accounting tools. ConnectWise, Autotask, Halo, SuperOps, QuickBooks, Xero, NetSuite, and more. Invoices go out automatically. Auto pay charges run automatically. Reconciliation happens darn near automatically. If you like automation, you're going to love this part of your stack. Bottom line, alternative payments is all about reclaiming your time, cutting your fees, and getting you paid faster. Most MSPs eliminate roughly 80% of their manual accounts receivable work. Many save around 3% on fees, and nearly everyone is getting cash in sooner, like days or weeks sooner, without chasing a single invoice. It's the one part of your system you really don't need to babysit. So I am also going to toss up a poll for alternative payments. If you're sitting there thinking, man, accounts receivable is rough. No pressure, no commitment. Let's have a quick chat to see if we can take AR off your plate. All you have to do is say a conversation couldn't hurt. Now, let's get back right into the good stuff with Pete. So, the first thing is, how do you draw the line between uh, your system roles? And I guess let's start with, what are the system roles that you would want to clarify for people?
So system roles, right? So um, we're going to talk about doing it right now, where we talked about some common mistakes. We're going to talk about doing it right and the system roles, right? So before you even sit down and do anything, you want to define the roles, right? Just like in an organization. Um, Marketing lives in HubSpot, right? So a
Mhm.
role of marketing you live in. Early stage sales lives in HubSpot, right?
Okay.
Service lives in the PSA, right?
Hmm.
And this goes back to what we were talking about, choosing where the data sources are. Late stage opportunities, you may live in one or both, right? So
Hmm.
depending on where the handoff is, right? And these are things that you have to decide because um, if everyone understands where everybody's living and where the data lives, then they know where to go. They know where to go to find it. They know where to go to search it. And they know where the handoff is. And that's where another common mistake is, going backwards a little bit, is people don't know where to look. So you'll often hear somebody saying, I got to be in 5 systems all the time to figure it out, right? So
Hmm.
if you define where everybody's working and where the prospects live and all that, you're going to get a little bit more clarity with uh, confusion or less confusion to get to the data and go. You'll avoid duplication and a lot of cleanup. You'll hear us say cleanup and garbage in, garbage out a lot, right? So
Yeah.
once those roles are clear, it's obvious what works inside the CRM or what works inside the PSA. So again, marketing lives in HubSpot. Sales, early stage sales lives in HubSpot. Service lives in PSA, right?
Okay.
And those are some good roles to go with.
Well, that helps define what like departments or job roles own systems. How do we define who owns individual records?
Oh, now inside a HubSpot or any CRM, you have to have an owner, right? So each
Do you
name that's
have
in the
to have an
system,
owner?
you don't have to, but it's recommended. If you want it to be active, it should have a owner, right? And it could be the house is the owner until it gets to a point and it moves over. But there should be some delineation of clearly defined owner and what that definition is. So if there's no owner, does that mean it's up for grabs? Does that mean it's a house account? What does that mean? So I highly recommend putting an owner on things, so you have transparency and can move through it, right?
Hmm.
But I always say you should have a designated owner and define that in your sales
Okay.
playbook or in your playbook that you're going to share with your team. Because once you share it, everybody's working from the same definitions, right? And that's huge, to keep confusion or that was my account and they stole it. Well, no, it said no owner. I would just went and took it because it said no owner and I needed to fill my box up with more contacts, right? So,
I don't see a problem.
uh, exactly, right?
Yeah, I don't see a problem.
So that'll help you with a single source of truth by doing that, right?
How
So,
when we think about record ownership, um, some sales teams start some teams might just start off with like a you eat what you kill type of mentality where I don't care, just figure it out kind of. I don't know, there might be a better way to say that, I don't know. But then as sales teams mature, you might find them going a certain direction, and that could be like maybe they're going to do round robin on inbound things, maybe they're going to do something territory based. um how else are, so I know of round robin and I know of territory. Like what other ways might people do things? Like have you seen like some people focus on certain sized companies or certain industries or
mhm. You can, but in most geographies where MSPs are operating, there's not that much unless they're in a major metro area that's got industry specific type things. So usually it's a geography and it goes. Round robin usually is more geared towards inbound calls or inbound
Mhm.
form generation conversions. However, the rules can be in play that it's very strict. This is the industry that person works it. It goes to that person, whether it's round robin or not. Uh, Round robin is more of a less mature operating uh, group, more so because you're just trying to feed your reps. So anything that comes in, you want to kind of spread the wealth, right? By doing that. So that's when you really don't have any territories or specificity of what that, you know, somebody's good at the enterprise or medium enterprise where others are down in the small business. They
Yeah.
cater differently. So round robin can be that. And that's very common in smaller. What I always tell you is as a organization, you have a responsibility to your salespeople to give them an assignment uh, to have transparency on how they're progressing. So if you've not done sales and marketing before and you're very immature, you might say, I hired a sales rep. They're going to bring their own book. They're going to go sell out. But honestly, within 2 months, you're sitting there scratching your head saying, why aren't they turning anything? Well, they're still new to your company. They're still new to, the culture, and they're not going to go rip their book and rip them out of existing places that quickly. It's going to take time, just like anything else. My thing, and I would say most would say is a best practice, is when a sales rep works through the door, you should have been marketing for 60 days before them, and they should be able to sit down in your CRM and see engagement, and they should have a list that's inside them. So I should be able to say, this rep walks through the door at my MSP or even my SaaS company, and here's your region, here's who is assigned to you, or here's 250 contacts that you're going to be working on because we've gotten a heat score of X, right? We've
Hmm.
warmed them up for you prior to you getting here, and we're going to live up to our commitment of helping feed your pipeline. And I think many times most organizations fail in that spot because they just say, here's a list, go start calling. And they haven't done any campaigns to follow them. They haven't done the background work, the foundational work that gets a sales rep launched and producing and actually having some good results in there. At least a better opportunity to have good results.
So how can MSPs, and I'm fast forwarding a little from the ownership. Now I'm thinking about integrations. So, we talked a little bit earlier about what MSPs should be doing before they actually turn on any integrations between HubSpot, PSA, other systems. But how can MSPs make sure that the integrations are actually serving their workflow instead of complicating it?
Yeah, so here's 5 things that everybody should write down, all 5 of
Oh,
these, right? So
okay.
the first thing that you want to do is determine what data needs to move, right? Does it need to move from one to the other, uh, both ways, unidirectional or bidirectional, but where it should do. Then you have to decide when should it move. And again, this goes back into mistakes that you make of not building the process first, right? Well, so number one is what data needs to move. Number two is when should it move? The third thing is who is responsible? Who's responsible to move that data or check on that data or ensure? Is that your data analyst? Is that a rep? Is that a marketing person? And if, for instance, is a marketing qualified lead becomes a sales qualified lead, how does that movement happen in a process, right? It's a big one, right? But who is responsible? Fourth one is what tool is going to be the source of truth? So is it going to be the PSA as the source of truth, or is it going to be the data that's coming from the CRM, i.e. HubSpot, right? And then the last one is
Can it
what's the,
be?
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
Go
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 ahead.
to go to five. I'll come back to my question.
Okay. And the fifth one is what the workflow looks like before and after the sync, right? So what happens before, what happens after, right? What is the outcome that you're trying to get to, and will the integration do it? So those 5 key things. So go ahead back now.
So let's start from one. So you said what data needs to move and
Mm-hmm.
what direction does it need to move? Is it unidirectional or bidirectional?
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. So let's just say that the data that would need to move could simply be contact information, company information, maybe quote information if you got that
Mm-hmm.
far, so on and so forth. And then number two, you said when should it move? So the simple act of creating a new contact record in your HubSpot CRM should not be a reason or a trigger to move that data. Or maybe it is, depending on how you want to keep the data, right?
Depends on
Um,
what your workflow is, right?
yeah, maybe the trigger is they expressed interest. They booked a meeting or whatever, right? And then maybe at that point, does it flow into your PSA and create a company, a contact, an opportunity, so on and so forth. Who's responsible to move, check, or ensure the data is still good? So you probably, I don't know, you should have, I'll call it like a manager of marketing who is able to oversee and ultimately responsible for making sure that HubSpot is doing what HubSpot is supposed to do. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And then that person would ultimately be the one who's responsible for the data.
Hmm.
However, it's okay for them to delegate certain checks or certain duties as part of that overall responsibility to individual contributors.
Correct. You're a good
Now,
student.
now you said what tool is going to be the source of truth, the PSA or the CRM, which in our case is HubSpot. Can the answer be it depends?
It does depend. Yes, it depends on
So,
where it is in the life cycle, and that's why we talked about life cycle stages earlier, defining the life cycle stage. So,
okay.
timing matters, mapping matters, and um, strategy matters as to how that data is going to flow, right?
Okay.
So, when you integrate with intent, you're going to save hours of cleanup. But again, yes, it could be. And, we'll talk about data flow, I think, here in a minute, but you want to avoid chaos of mismatched properties and broken automations. And that's the integrate with intent using those five key elements that I talked about.
So, going back to item number four, what tool is going to be the source of truth, PSA or HubSpot? My question of can it be? It depends. The answer is yes, and it
Hmm.
probably should depend. So if they are a marketing lead, they've maybe never interacted with your company other than hopefully opting in to be a marketing lead,
Hmm.
and not just being like a random email address you picked up on the side of the road or whatever.
You
We'll
just
talk
did
about
that.
we'll talk about that in a second. Uh, then that should be like the source of truth for that is HubSpot. And it's still important that you have data integrity in HubSpot. I'm just saying HubSpot is like the top of the funnel, and you want your PSA to be closer to the bottom of the funnel. And by by not sending everything to the PSA, now the PSA is only going to have the people in there that like really mattered to
Or
the service
transact
delivery.
people that are transacting with you.
Yes, yes,
Right.
thank you.
So what I say is the good analogy is um, a prospect or a potential buyer gets a quote and they say they'd like to move forward. They're
Hmm.
still living in HubSpot. At that point, you're going to do some kind of study or network analysis. At that point, you need to move that quote into your PSA so you can get your engineer tagged or your tech tagged, and they can record time and a billable event if it's billable or non-billable. That data now becomes uh, a client or a potential client over here based on what type of study you're doing, whether it's no cost or cost, right? At that point, you're going to get a result that moves back, right? And the intent of that integration and that impact on the flow is to trigger something back to sales saying, here's what you need to quote, here's the result, here's what you need to deliver. The next quote goes out. You may now still have HubSpot as the authoritative piece, but now you go out and you present your proposal, you deliver a proposal, and you win it. Now inside of HubSpot, they may be cataloged in your segment or your list as a client. The life cycle change goes, the lead status changes, and now the authoritative portion may move from the quote over into the PSA, and the PSA now becomes the authoritative data source and the truth for that client moving forward, not the CRM. Make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, all right. So
Now,
we just kind of talked about data flow a little bit, but I got a little bit more to say about it.
yeah. So when we talked about the checks and audits to do around it, right?
hmm So
And
I think one of the things you pointed out, though, not everything needs to be synced to the PSA,
yeah,
right? And don't bring over tickets. Like you don't have to bring over every ticket. If it really is not going to be something that's going to turn into high transaction or a transactional customer, do you want to bring over every ticket? What defines a ticket from service that sales needs to understand? Okay. And make sure that all the properties are mapping properly. Because if they don't, um, you set up and you think you're moving data to the right people or to the right trigger that might be in the PSA. Because when data enters, there might be workflows for technical people when they come in that sales and marketing are not aware of, right? So each system has its own set of workflows and um, pieces that need to flow properly for the organization to run efficiently. So sync what has value, create filters, use lists, sync policies, decide on sync policies. So, and go from there.
it's awesome, man. And it is actually 1 o'clock, so we
hmm
do need to wrap up. Pete, is there any other like last final words of wisdom that you would like to impart on our audience?
So I think, building blocks and foundation are important steps to do upfront and will cause you or help you not have a lot of pain in the future for
Hmm.
growth. So, defining your system roles, clarifying ownership, mapping your data, designing your workflows, and that builds you a scalable foundation to be a little bit more agile after the fact. If you take the time up front, you're going to have a much better implementation, and that's just the bottom line.
So
So,
true. And I think as MSPs, hopefully you will already know that because you know it to be true when you're doing your Microsoft 365 migrations from Google Workspace or whatever, right? You know that building out your framework is critical in order to making sure that the implementation actually goes smoothly. So, hey,
mhm.
everyone, thank you so much for attending our webinar today. For those watching live, today's Monday, November 24th. I hope you all enjoy your Thanksgiving break if you're here in the States. Pete, the same for you. I really appreciate you,
As
man.
you too.
I hope
Thank
you
you.
enjoy your Thanksgiving. And we
Enjoy.
will catch you guys next week. We've got 3 webinars. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, we're going big. We're going big next week, guys.
All
So,
right.
yeah,
Well,
you
thanks for
all
having us on.
absolutely. You all have yourselves a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.